So tell me, Michael, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, a town called Albion.
Okay. All right. So tell me about your childhood. How did you grow up? What was your family life like?
I grew up very poor. My family was on public assistance. I grew up around drugs as a kid. One of my family members offered me marijuana. I was sexually assaulted as a kid by 2 teenage boys at different times, and also a teenage girl. And so, with the violence from drinking and alcohol and drugs around me, nothing that I'm aware of regarding cocaine, but there was, there was a lot of chaos around me, so which then made me violent. I would, I'd hit my mother and my father, not like just like a lash out as a kid. And, my father was ill. I had to deal with him having cancer, plus my father was 65 when I was born. So, I had to deal with, 5 half-brothers from his first marriage, dealing and coping with the age difference there, along with the 2 half-sisters that were the same age as the other, around the ages from the first marriage, the 7 of the first marriage. And it was difficult because we had a 3-room shack that had the black particle board from the building that was on the outside of the house, and we had and tar paper on parts of the house. So I grew up very poor, and my mother was schizophrenic and had seizures, and so she went through abuse as well, as she told me. So her dealing with that, and spanking is not a good thing for a child, but the way she dealt with us kids my sister and I is the way she was dealt with, I'm sure, when she was a child. She abandoned me when I was 12 years old because my father passed away. When she, my half-brother, there was different types of rumors going around, like my family sleeping with each other, so that was detrimental as a kid. And other kids around the neighborhood making fun of you because, you're poor and you're on public assistance and so forth. So, and then, you didn't have the latest fashions. So, I had to deal with, I guess what you call bullying or wanting to join into a clique and so forth. So I had to deal with all these problems and adjust. And I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about, but it's and then also there was rumors. My half brother married a 14-year-old teenager, and back then you didn't hear much about pedophilism as you do now, but I'm sure I heard people talk about it, and I had to deal with that, with amongst family members. How you're a kid and you can hear in the other room. Just different things of that nature. And it was my half brother that married the 14-year-old, and then it was weird to have a niece 2 years younger than me. So dealing with those sorts of things and people talking about you behind your back, and so. After my mother abandoned me, my teenage years, my half-brother took me in. That was, my father owned 2 lots, or my family owned 2 lots, and I would stay with him in the trailer, but he kept us in a laundry room, and my sister and I slept in bunk beds, and we had to wear dirty clothes out of a pile on the floor because his wife didn't keep up with laundry. She wasn't happy with us being there, and I stayed there, and different kinds of things of abuse as people go through. My generation, I'm sure it's still going on today, which is sad. Putting kerosene on your head when you have head lice and things of that nature. So it's detrimental. And then another half brother took me in after. My sister went to stay with him during the summer. You have that feeling where you don't want them, they don't really want you to around or want you to be included. So, you know, I called them and told them that, you know, I wanted to get away from there. And, you know, because my other half brother would take the funds from from you know, the benefits of having my sister and I, because he was caring for my sister and myself after my mother abandoned us. Because I'm jumping around now, but to add to the story, my mother, when she abandoned us, I went to an all-night church function to raise money for the church, and she left my sister alone, and she went out drinking with her new boyfriend. So when I came home that morning from the church function, she had the car loaded, and they were leaving. So, you know, that's how I ended up with my one half brother on the lot, and I'm sorry for the mistake. But we stayed there. He would, with the income, instead of buying us the clothes that we needed and wanted, like maybe only 1 or 2 pairs of new clothes to go to school, we would, you know, he would drink it up. And I know he smoked marijuana because I seen him smoking marijuana. And, you know, there was physical abuse with him as well, growing up, you know, because, you know, as you're unruly, you know, you get, and then you really, but then you look up to them, and then because they have more of the sane ideals that somebody should have, but yet they really aren't, are lacking in, you know, other areas. So back to the story of where I moved to Ohio. It was another half brother, and he was a semi driver, and his wife took my sister and I in. But we, you know, when you're caring for somebody, you don't make them feel shame for it. And I felt shame because, you know, it was a convenience, and it was an inconvenience for me to be there. And so, you know, growing up with that, and then, you know, dealing with other issues as a teenager, you know, it's, you know, your sex, there's, you know, you have to deal with your, you know, hormone changes and all that. So, you know, it's just hard. And then, you know, I was excelling and getting good grades because of the more positive influence. But whenever I spoke, you know, and spoke about how I felt, I got hit. I got slapped for wanting to go to church. And I was on a quiz team there, and I wasn't allowed. They weren't going to let me go to the tournament, and I was even getting good grades. So it was hard to understand, and, you know, I basically had to beg to go, and I had to beg to also, you know, I was working. I got a job working. I worked at Dairy Queen, and I was a Fraser boy there, and then I also delivered papers. Started delivering papers. Then I changed those to a meat packing plant. But, you know, I did everything that I could to please them, you know, because you have that environment to where you want to accelerate, but, you know, and then, you know, you get shut down by insults and, you know, people talking to you. You know, it happens to all of us. But, you know, it's, you know, you shouldn't make people feel bad because they need something, such as dental work. You know, I paid $5,000 for your teeth because I had periodontitis. You know, it's detrimental, and that moves on through your life as you know, grow. But I started to rebel there, and then I finally, you know, I was able to. Now that's where I got hit sometimes, you know, and So I went to this, you know, I wanted to go to church, and Stephen and with the neighbors, and they started getting me going to church, and, you know, on the quiz team, and he told me I was imposing on him, so he slapped me, and then, you know, I got sick of it, and then I ran to the police station. In the time prior to this, you know, I was speaking to this couple that goes to church, and they said they'd take me in. So I told the police officers that I wanted to go to a home or a foster care. You know, they said home back in the 80s and 70s, and or stay with these people because they offered for me to stay there. And so they ended up coming and taking me in, and I changed schools and ended up going to a Christian high school. And I was going through some rough patches there. And, you know, I got, you know, it just, you know, some of the things I was going through, you know, they said they couldn't handle it. So I went to a different family in the church. When they told me they didn't, you know, because I really cared for them, and it devastated me. And I started getting violent again, and I couldn't accept the other people from church, or I wouldn't allow myself to care for them because of all the resentment that grew inside me. So I stayed with them until I went to college for, you know, my junior and senior year of high school, and then I went to college. And I couldn't wait to get away from them because, you know, I couldn't stand being around somebody that told me that they loved me, and I couldn't accept it. So they took me to a psychiatrist or a counselor, and I was dealing with these emotions and these feelings. And you know, I told them I was having homosexual feelings. And they couldn't, you know, they said, well, you know, the counselor said, well, you don't need to, you know, this is a sin and this is everything, you know, and you know, I tried to change, you know, and I did change, and, you know, I was fighting something that I couldn't face. And, you know, every time that I would try to face it, you know, and talk about it, you know, it was like something that it was a mortal sin to talk about, you know, because, you know, it was disgusting to them, you know, and I was like, and, you know, you can't sit there and block something out and not talk about it. And so, you know, it just builds up and builds up. So I went to college, and I was doing great in school. I came out of the closet in the college, and then I was sexually assaulted by the international student advisor there at college. And they told me that my foster mother told me that I wanted it. So I quit school and moved to Washington, D.C., and there's where I started taking drugs. I started with a drug, you know, I moved there to Washington, D.C. because I knew I had a friend in college. Her name was Monica, and she was bisexual, and, you know, I stayed with her, and then, you know, I went back to college and gathered my things, and then I basically ended up on the streets in Washington, D.C. You know, I would go to a Sexual Minority Youth Assistance League in Washington, D.C., and people there, somebody helped me, but, you know, I felt free, so I started to disrespecting myself and not caring about, you know, my job and everything. And then, you know, all that behavior started coming out of, you know, all the resentment and all the rebellion started to come out to where I started taking LSD. Well, you know, come to find out it wasn't LSD, it's chemicals they put on paper. And I took that, and then I started doing cocaine, taking cocaine, going to the club every night. I started being promiscuous. It got worse, and then I got to the point where I had to, you know, I got sick of staying on the streets. You know, I was on the streets maybe a total of 2 weeks, but I called my church back in Ohio, because just for the record, I was in college in Virginia. Back to my church in Ohio, and they sent me money for a bus ticket, and I went back there, started to, you know, and then they were telling me, you know, we don't allow that kind of behavior here and all that, you know. And I said, I understand, but it just triggered something in me to where, you know, I started becoming manipulative. You know, I was working at a chicken processing plant, and I would manipulate people at church to let me use their car. And then I started going out to the bars there and getting drunk and driving their vehicles intoxicated. You know, I just want to say this too. A lot of people are against homosexuality, and you wanted me to be blatantly honest, and that's why I brought it up. And I'm thinking about, I don't know, I'm in between asking whether that should be taken out of the film or not. It's hard to deal with, you know, to feel accepted. And yeah, you end up becoming a different person. You know, I'm doing this to help people. And that's the main thing about it. So don't judge me by other people. I'm like other people. And I just want to make that clear. If you're going to help somebody, do it to help them. No matter who they are. I was my drug control use got out of control. I was in Ohio, and I quit my job, and I took back off to Washington, D.C. Actually, I talked to somebody, and I manipulated them, you know, and for something that I wanted, and he actually liked me. It was a school friend, and if I could tell him I'm sorry, you know. If he could see this production, his name is Mike Smith, and I manipulated people to go to Washington, D.C. to get what I wanted. I ended up staying there after we went out to the club. You know, my nephew was with me. My nephew's my same age. He ended up going, no, that was in college, I'm sorry. But my nephew was with me when we went out to the club when I was in college. And he and I had a bad experience because we were sexually assaulted together. And we had my sister and I were forced to be, or we're not forced, but we were encouraged to have sexual interactions between each other. You know, I got to the point to where I almost, not to be disgusting, I almost attacked my own sister. And my niece, that was 2 years older than me, she was within this group too. But, you know, this jumping around really bothers me. But you wanted me to be blatantly honest. So, so we ended up going to, from Ohio to back to Washington, D.C. I told him about this club that I used to go to when I was living in Washington, D.C. And so we went out there to have fun. He and some school friends that were girls. And I just, you know, just dissed them, and you know, I told them I wasn't going back with them. I met somebody at the club, and you know, I didn't want to go back to the church setting because, you know, I could not feel like I could even talk about it. Not that I would even, you know, display any kind of behaviors. Pardon me, but I couldn't even talk about it. And you know, I felt like I was trapped in prison. And so, you know, I stayed there, and then went home with someone else, and ended up staying there at his place, and then, you know, and then ended up leaving there because, you know, I was immature, very immature behavior-wise, you know, because I was I was going through the devastation, as well as, being shunned by my family because, I left because I was slapped, with the first family from the church. Then, along with the sexual assault and everything, nobody wanted to talk about that. But yet, I was asked about it. I was asked about it, but then I didn't want to talk about it. Now that I recollect it correctly, but while I stayed in Patuxent River, Maryland, after I left Washington D.C. and left my friends there, and moved to, and then befriended somebody that was his roommate, and then we ended up moving to Virginia Beach because he lived in Virginia Beach, and I stayed with him and his family there. But while I was staying in Virginia Beach, I got a job, and I was supposed to get on my own feet, and I started getting into cocaine there again. And somebody that I had known was the dealer, committed credit card fraud because of the actions and behaviors of the drugs, and ended up going to jail for it. And then started work, I got out on a personal recognizance or a PR signature. And because a friend, the manager of the restaurant I was working at, he knew the magistrate. So I still ended up doing more drugs after that and drinking and got a letter from my foster parents, the second ones that I couldn't accept, and just completely blew them off because I had a grudge for them. So as time progressed in Virginia and I worked, I was reckless. I didn't use any kind of protection for I didn't use any kind of sexual protection, very rarely, and I couldn't hold a stable relationship, and because of all the people that I thought were my friends, I surrounded myself with people that weren't good for me because I felt accepted by them. And and there was other people that accepted me, but they didn't do the things that I thought was fun. And you're in denial and you're damaging your life. So I left Virginia with a partner of mine and moved to Cape Girardeau. And 2 weeks later, he told me he didn't care for me anymore. So that relationship I had left, and then we moved here because this was his first assignment. And I stopped doing drugs and everything for people instead of myself. And he just he would play games with me when he was going to school in Tennessee, because I stayed there because it was from Virginia to Tennessee, where he was going to school to train for a restaurant manager. And he told me he didn't care for me anymore, and then he'd send me on a bus back to Virginia. And it happened 3 times. So that was mentally tormenting. So, that calmed down, and then we ended up here. And then, like I said, 2 weeks later, it was over, and he was seeing somebody else. So I got a job working at a residential care facility here locally, and ended up staying in their basement. And worked there for a while, and then got another job. But while here in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, I got into methamphetamines, opiates, Adderall. I mean, I went to a doctor and I could just get them like that because I'm HIV positive. I ended up acquiring HIV. By being foolish, and I'm embarrassed to say this because it can happen to anyone. But I ended up acquiring HIV, and I'm lucky I didn't acquire another STD with it. And
I have more question for you're worthy of love now?
Some of the things that I've done while on drugs, being very violent, I question, you know, because I got violent, abusive, suicidal. And some of the things that I had done, you know, some people wouldn't even accept. They would just push you away, you know. So I'm working on, with encouraging people here and, watching videos. I've watched military videos to apply discipline to my life, and it seems to be, and it's been working. I tell myself things that, to encourage myself, but I told, Dr. Melissa Strickle here, I told her everything in my life that I've done, and she still gives me a hug, and accepts me, and and actually cares for me, and that right there means everything to me. When you have conditions. Granted, my foster parents told me that they cared for me conditionally. They didn't, or unconditionally, rather. I'm sorry. There was conditions that they still would hug me and everything, but the homosexuality, I was, nothing. They even said I could come back and stay with them after college, and I wouldn't, because you hear in your head, all the, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you're an adult. But yet, don't listen to how, how I feel, or what my perspectives are about it. Or, that's in my person of thinking.